Okay, cool. So can you tell me, what can readers expect from your book, especially those who have no idea about the black metal evolution?
I guess the black metal evolution of the cult book is an introduction and an explanation of the black metal phenomenon through the voices of the people who made it happen. So it interviews over 100 musicians and people that were involved in the creation of the black metal genre, whether it's members of Mayhem, Venom, Blasphemy, Hellhammer, Dark Throne, Mysticum, Emperor, pretty much all the bands who kind of created what it is today. And it allows them to speak, I think, and sort of clear up a lot of misunderstandings and tell a lot of things and stories that were never told before. So I see that book as sort of the foundation. Obviously, there's it's a series of books, really, but that's the one that sort of sets the foundation by talking about how black metal was created in the 80s and 90s.
How does the book differ to other books written on a very similar topic?
It's definitely kind of it sort of sets the scene. So the evolution of the cult is, a lot of it is talking about, it's really tracking how musical and cultural influence comes together to create the genre. So it's sort of talking about each of the people interviewed is not only talking about their own band and their own music, but also talking about what they were inspired by. So, for example, you'll have Enslaved talking about Master's Hammer. You'll have Psy from Japan talking about Bathory from Sweden. So it really looks at how these things are linked and how sort of black metal was created. And then the later books kind of go into more detail on particular aspects of the black metal scene, whether it's black metal in Norway, black metal in Poland, depressive black metal, or, whatever, folk black metal. It's sort of it's such a huge genre and it's such a huge cultural phenomenon that you could never tell the whole story in one book. But that first book, Evolution of the Cult, is really about what is black metal, how it was created, and why it was created.
What is the biggest misunderstanding of black metal?
There's so many. That's a hard question.
If you had to choose one.
Yeah, I think people from the outside of, what I would say is that black metal, of all the forms of heavy music, rock, metal, it's probably the most diverse and has the most aspirations musically, intellectually, philosophically, culturally. It's so broad, and there's so much contained within it. And I think so. The biggest misconception, I think, in people looking into it who aren't involved in the scene is that it's somehow, this narrow thing that is just about corpse paint, Satanism, church burning, bass drums. All those things are aspects of black metal, but it's so much broader than that. So I think in later years, especially kind of younger people perhaps, have kind of taken this sort of template that Dark Throne and Burzum created, and maybe Mayhem, and they've sort of narrowed everything down to being, if it doesn't conform to that, it's not black metal. If it doesn't sound like Dark Throne in '94, it's not black metal. And I guess that's the misunderstanding.
Why did you set out to write such a big book, figuratively and literally?
Well, I would have liked it to be even bigger, actually.
600 pages is a lot.
It is long. I find to consider all these books to be part of one big book. So now we're on. Well, I've got a new book coming out in 2 months. So when that's released, we'll be on 1,200 pages. It's too broad a subject not to have a lot of space given to it, and also what I didn't want was to sort of retell old stories, and I didn't want things to be superficial, and in order to go into the sort of detail where you can offer readers something that hasn't been told before, you really have to give a lot of space, and so each chapter, they're long chapters, and the bands, the people are talking in more detail than they would normally say. So you have people, everyone from like Snorrush to Benrez to Kronos to whoever it is, but they have the space to tell their story and talk about everything from their childhood through to why they started making black metal and talking about certain songs. And so I guess that's the answer, is that I didn't want to spare any detail, and I didn't want to limit the discussion, I guess.
What is your personal connection to black metal?
Well, I discovered black metal in '95. I was still at school, but I'd stopped going to school for a while, and I became friends with kind of older people who were at college and so on. And I was already listening to more mainstream metal, I guess, stuff like Carcass and Sepultura, Megadeth, and all this stuff, Ultra. And yeah, they kind of introduced me to the scene in the mid-90s, and I sort of embraced that pretty early on, started going to concerts. And that's 20 years ago already, that's 21 years ago. So yeah, I guess I was sort of part of the scene in some way since I was at school, since I was quite a young kid, and I got more involved with it as the years went on. So around 2002, I was taking photos for magazines, and 2004, I guess it was, I started my own fanzine, which it wasn't just black metal, it was kind of all different fashions. There was quite a lot of black metal in it. Mm-hmm. And then I started writing Terrorizer and Metal Hammer, and it's just been a sort of journey since then, really, of interviewing and photographing bands. And I had a club night for a couple of years, which played a lot of black metal. I put on events, black metal shows. I've sort of been involved in lots of aspects of the culture, really.
Is this all in the UK?
I've travelled, obviously, to sort of do what I do. Finland, Norway, Sweden, all over really. But I'm based in the UK, and in the last 15 years, London. So most of the events I put on, for example, and this sort of thing, it's all in London. It's a good place to be if you're into black metal, because there's so many bands playing, so many events here. Mm-hmm. There's probably, I can't think of many places that are better to be than London if you're interested in seeing live music or being involved in specific events.
How has the book been received across the world, I'd say? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of people outside the country outside the UK have read it.
Yeah. It was published, first book was published in America, so that kind of, I think it probably, it has quite a following there. And I'd say it's fairly well known in Europe. It's been received well. Reviews have been generally really good. I think the average rating on Amazon and Goodreads and all that is 4.5 out of 5. So, the reviews are all good. Magazine reviews have all been really strong. A lot of people. I think there's 33,000 people on the Facebook page now. So I'd say it has a pretty strong following. Having said that, some people are only becoming aware of it now, which is kind of interesting because I wrote that book while I released it. What are we on now? 2016. So that's over 2 years ago I released that book. 2.5 years ago. And as I say, I released another book last year, and I'm just about to release the third book. And it's kind of interesting that I'm trying to promote the third book, and some people are literally just sort of discovering the first book. But that, I think that's probably understandable because this is quite a niche topic, and there's always new people.
It is a very niche topic, especially in South Africa, in the South African context. Black metal isn't very popular here, and it's getting to a point where a lot of discussion about Satanism and a whole lot of stuff is getting thrown around in the media, especially with Behemoth and Rotten Christ coming over. So it's quite interesting to think people are looking back to the history of it and trying to get to know the genre a little bit better. In your opinion, how do you think this affects countries where black metal isn't popular?
Well, it's interesting because I set up my own company, which is Cult Never Dies, which is a publishing company and a merchandise company. And we publish 2 of the books in this series. And we also do shirts and exclusive clothes for bands like Rotting Christ, The Herod, Ulver, Enthroned, Hades Almighty, Sigh, and all those kind of bands making them here. And so it's quite useful. I don't patent post everything myself, but I see everything usually coming in. And it's quite interesting because obviously you get these statistics from the web store about which countries are ordering books, And we have sent some stuff out to South Africa over the last 2 years, but it's definitely very low on the list. The main countries are North America, Europe, Australia, even, but we don't get that much from, say, Japan, from Asia. We don't get that much from South Africa, and I think, certain countries, these are new markets, new kind of new areas which are sort of discovering black metal. And if you're not, when you first encounter black metal, it's quite a confusing and sort of dramatic genre to try and interpret. And black metal's not an easy genre to interpret, which is a large reason why I've written these books. It's not, if you try and judge or understand black metal on its face, on the kind of superficial level, you'll never understand it. It's much more complex than say, I would say, than death metal or R&B or whatever other type of music. It's very complicated. There's a lot of contradicting opinions and contradicting worldviews, even within classic black metal. It's not a genre or a culture where everyone has the same ideas or everyone has the same ethics or aspirations, or so that's the complex thing. When and obviously a lot of countries which are discovering black metal, they're wary because it's quite hard to penetrate. It's quite hard to kind of get into, and then obviously if it's a religious country, you do have issues like the satanic or the anti-Christian aspect, the anti-religious aspect, and that's always how it was. When I got into this music in the mid-90s, you couldn't even buy these records in the shops, really. Maybe a couple of bands you could, but it wasn't. It's certainly a lot more accessible now than it used to be because of the internet, and because it's got a much bigger fan base than it used to. So that's nothing new in a way. If you wanted to get into black metal in the 90s, you really had to work hard, and it was really underground. And I guess in some countries like China, maybe South Africa, and parts of Asia and so on, it's sort of the same as it was back then. You don't necessarily know anyone else who's into this music. You have to work hard to try and understand it. And I hope these books, although these books are written partly for people that really have been in this scene for a long time and are dedicated to it, they're also for people who are getting into it to kind of understand it better.
was the most shocking information you came across during research?
That's a hard question. I'm not sure. Probably, because I'd sort of been researching, if you like, the scene for 15 years before I even started writing the book. So it was hard for me. There wasn't really anything I can say that particularly shocked me. There were things that surprised me. For example, it surprised me that most of the people that invented black metal as we know it today were influenced by Kiss, the glam metal band from America. I thought it was quite a surprise. I can't say I was particularly shocked because, a lot of the violence and the murders and the more shocking aspects I sort of knew about already. I would say, I guess some of the details in the book, like, for example, Short from Member and How Making Promise talks a lot about when him and his friends were involved in attacking some Christian people, and that, I didn't really know about that side of things, so that was kind of interesting to hear. I don't know if anything particularly shocked me. There are obviously extreme elements, within the whole story, but it's a very political sort of scene in Eastern Europe, and you've got all the stories that everyone knows about the church burnings and the murders and so on. But as I say, none of that was really news to me by that point. It was probably news to me. It was probably shocking to me when I was, 14 or whatever.
Okay. Anything that you'd like to add?
I think so. Well, is it true that Rotting Christ are playing under a different name in South Africa?
Yes, I'm actually doing an interview with Sakis right after you. Yeah, they had to change their name because they weren't allowed into the country with a satanic symbol. Rotting Christ. Obviously, South Africa is predominantly Christian, so that wasn't going to fly. Even the venue were not happy about that.
That's kind of, to me, that's actually more shocking to hear than anything else, because it just seems like attitudes from a different century.
It does, actually. There's a petition going around, and it's reached about 3,500 people against what's happening, which is sad because there's only roughly 2,000 metalheads, so we're being outweighed in a big way.
That's the thing. It's a different. Over here you can do anything. I guess we get a little bit spoiled like that. In a sense, you can do the most satanic show that you wanted in London. There's never going to be any complaints about it.